I live in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains in northeast Georgia. It's a beautiful area with hundreds of miles of national forest, some great state parks, and a ton of fantastic camping places. Unfortunately, my hometown is also relatively poor. While there are some out-of-town residents from Atlanta and other places, a lot of people where I live are really poor. I do freelance work as a technical writer, so I can do most of my work online. If I didn't have that going for me, I'd have to move somewhere else. It's just one of those small towns that will rob you of your ability to accomplish anything in life if you stay there too long, without anything else going for you at least. Excluding a handful of doctors and lawyers, and Georgia Power Company employees, the only employment in the area was at a Walmart, fast food joint, or a couple of grocery stores. To the east of my town, there's a massive national forest. It's loaded with great camping sites and lots of relatively unused hiking trails. I really enjoy hiking on them with my dog, but it can be a bit of an unnerving experience sometimes. It's about a 10-mile drive from town, and there's no mobile service or homes for miles. In the past, there have been a lot of vehicle break-ins at the trailheads. The gravel parking lots at some of them glitter with bits of broken glass from what I'm guessing were car windows. Sometimes there are really shifty people hanging around those trailheads, or just driving around the Forest Service roads. These are rough roads, and you'll see these beat-up $500 cars just barreling along roads meant for 4x4s. Some of the people you see in the cars look like the guy that got crushed by an ATM in Breaking Bad. All that being said, it's still a great place to camp. However, you just have to be careful. A few years ago, two of my friends and I decided to go play paintball in the National Forest. Probably not legal, I know. We decided to turn the paintball expedition into a camping trip so we could play the next morning too. After a pretty uneventful day of shooting paintballs at each other, we drive a couple of miles to one of the more popular camping spots. Unfortunately, a church group or something had taken up all the spots in the area. This was really the only camping spot that we were familiar with, and it was getting pretty late. We decided to keep on looking, so we drive for about another hour further into the woods. By this time, it's already getting a bit dark, and we're getting worried about finding a spot. We all had GPS on our smartphones, but none of us had any service. We turn off onto an unfamiliar road that isn't in very good shape. In fact, it looks like the forest rangers used a backhoe to block off the road with a mound of dirt. A broken metal barrier lay in the woods nearby. That said, it looked like four-wheel drive vehicles had been going over the mound, so it's pretty worn down. Our F-150 had pretty high clearance, so we decided to just go over it. There was an old gravel road on the other side, and the road was pretty much clear of debris. We drove a few miles down this road and came across an opening next to a small creek. There were some blue tarps hanging over a plywood table nailed to a tree, which seemed pretty odd. That said, it was pretty much dark at this point and we didn't want to keep driving around all night looking for a camping spot. We left the truck light running and we set up the tent. As we were setting up the tent, I started to notice that there was a lot of trash in the woods surrounding the site. I see a green bottle lying on the ground. I take a look at the label and saw that it was a bottle of Home and Garden insecticide. I was really tired at the time and I just thought that someone had been dumping their home garbage out here. None of us thought it was weird that someone would be dumping garbage in an area that is more than an hour from our nearest home. We set up camp, had some beers, made chili from scratch. By this time, it was probably around 11 PM. As we were eating, we noticed a faint glow from the other side of a nearby hill. At first, we thought it was the moonlight filtering its way through the trees. However, the angles just didn't make sense. It didn't seem to be a bright light, and it wasn't moving. It was kind of like that glow you see over a bright city. We couldn't see the light source itself though. Since there were no other access roads in the area, we decided it wasn't other campers. The hill was about a quarter mile from our campsite, so we decided to go investigate. Under normal circumstances, I know, I wouldn't have done so. However, we all had a few rum and cokes in our stomach, and two of us, Jacob and I, decided to go take a look. My other friend, Isaac, decides to stay behind to pop some popcorn over the fire. We start walking towards the light source and the situation gets even stranger. All the trees in the area have their bark knocked off in a circle around their trunks. We thought it could have been the work of a beaver that lived in the creek, but it seemed strange that a beaver would go around all the trees and just knock the bark off in a circle. Jacob and I started talking about the ghost beaver in pretty loud voices, probably due to our drunkenness. We're almost at the top of the hill. Jacob tripped and yelled, "Oh shit." A few seconds after he yelled, the light, whatever it was, went out. We look at each other and decide that maybe we don't need to see what that light was after all. We walk back in silence and keep looking back every few seconds. We decide to turn off our flashlight and just use the moonlight to get back to camp. When we get a couple of 100 feet from the campsite, I can see my other friend Isaac walking around the camp. He's wearing a hooded coat that I hadn't seen him wearing before. For some reason, he's carrying his paintball gun around in his hand. That seemed a little odd, we said to each other. The fire had started to die down, so we couldn't see our campsite very well. At this point, We'd probably been gone for almost an hour. From the distance, it looked like Isaac was looking for something. He kept walking around the campsite and was peering into the tent. When we were almost back to camp, we saw Isaac walk up the road we came in on. We figured that he was going to use the bathroom and didn't want to wander through the woods like us. When we got back, we sat next to the fire and waited for Isaac to come back. All of a sudden, we saw him lurch out of the tent. He stumbles a few feet and vomits. After we left, he had a few more rum and cokes, he mumbled. As we asked him why he kept wandering around the campsite with a paintball gun, he gets a strange look on his face. "They're locked up in the cab of the truck. Did you unlock it?" We go and check the truck. Enter the door code and see all our paintball equipment just as we left it before. The key to the truck was still hidden in a magnetic fob underneath. I get a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. "Isaac, what were you doing after we left?" I asked. "I was watching a movie on my phone and I fell asleep, I guess." "But you were walking around with your paintball gun, right? Did you just change jackets?" Isaac said he'd been in the tent since we left, and that he had been wearing the same unhooded fleece all night. Someone had been walking around our campsite, and it wasn't Isaac. At this point, all of us were way too drunk to drive, but we decided to go ahead and pack up and go back to my house for the night. We don't bother packing up the tent, we just fold it down with the sleeping bags and everything in it. We jump in the F-150 and I started to drive out. When we get to the dirt hump, we see something grey blocking our path. The metal barrier that had been lying in the woods earlier is now back on its stand, right on top of the hump. By this point, all of us have sobered up to the situation. No one wants to get out of the car and try to move the barrier. I had a metal guard on the front of the F-150, so I drive forward slowly, tapping the metal barrier with the front of my truck. It falls right off. It must have just been balanced on top, and we drive over it slowly. We were terrified that it would pop one of the truck's tires as it drove over it, but it didn't. As we drive down the road, we see a vehicle following us with its lights off. It's probably 1,000 feet behind us, but we keep catching glimpses of it as the moon reflects light off it. I start to drive as fast as I can on the service road, and the other vehicle keeps pace. It doesn't get any closer though. It stays just 1 or 2 turns behind us. We can only see it when the road straightens out. After about 45 minutes of speeding on gravel roads, we make it back to the main paved road. I started to drive everyone back to my house, but I decided to go a different way just to be safe. I didn't get pulled over for a DUI, luckily. Camping can be fun, but very rural camping can be dangerous. I've driven past that metal barrier since that time, but it's always been in place. I would never go down that road again though. My childhood best friend, Marie, and I were around 11 or 12 years old at the time. Marie's family had their own campsite in a provincial park about 2 hours from our hometown, and would spend the entire summer each year living in their camper out there. This particular summer, I was able to go and stay with them for a week, and we were excited to spend our time adventuring around the forest. On the last night that I was there, we decided we wanted to hurry down to the ice cream shop by the lake before it closed. It was early evening at this point, but still pretty bright out, but beginning to lose light. The path we took was down a short slope right next to the main road, with maybe 10 feet of thick brush and trees in between. On the other side was the forest, with more tall, thick brush. So we were walking along, not seeing a single other person on the path in front or behind us. We hear a sudden rustling and snapping of branches, similar to the sound of maybe a deer moving through the woods. I wouldn't have thought anything about it, but then, the sound of running footsteps follows. Marie glances back, and suddenly grabs my arm, urging me under her breath not to look back. At the same time, the running stops. I don't know why I didn't ignore her and get a look myself. I guess I could sense the very real fear in her voice and chose to listen. We both start to panic, getting that feeling like when you're running up the stairs after turning the basement light off. We pick up speed as much as we can without breaking into a sprint, knowing the ice cream shop is only about a minute walk away at this point. The path soon breaks and we're in the parking lot. Suddenly, Marie steers me hard to the left, heading towards the lake and the boat rental instead of continuing straight to the ice cream shop. And I go along with it silently, understanding ice cream is no longer an interest right now. Marie is clearly panicking at this point. We are both looking around, but it seems whatever scared her is nowhere in sight at this point. Marie walks up to the boat rental and gets us a kayak, climb in, and begin to paddle out into the middle of the lake. As we paddle, she tells me there was a man behind us, and the man had stopped running at us very abruptly upon making eye contact with her. He had been wearing a long black coat with the hood up, despite it being the middle of July, and had a terrible smirk on his face. And she swore that as he stopped running, she saw him putting something shining away into his coat. He appeared to have just emerged out of the bushes after we walked past, given the sounds we heard right before he came running onto the path. We reached the center of the lake and stopped paddling. I pull out my Nokia brick phone that my parents, thank God, had given me just in case. I hand it to Marie and tell her to call her parents to come pick us up. As the phone rings, I see her look out past me to the shore and go pale. Lifting a hand to point to what she's seeing, I turn, and there was a man, stalking his way around the path that circled the edge of the lake, staring out at us. We sat in the middle of the lake and watched him do 2 full laps, never looking away from us, before finally disappearing. It took a few tries to get a hold of her family. We were freaking out so bad the whole time, as the sun got lower and lower. We did manage to have someone come with the truck, but by the time we reached the shore it was pretty dark outside. I don't know what we would have done if we hadn't been able to call for a ride. Looking back, I don't know why we didn't just go to the ice cream shop, inform an adult there, and ask her parents to come and get us then. But it worked out, we got back safe, and we thankfully never saw the man again. So, to begin, this event took place in summer of 2019 in England, or more specifically the Midlands. At the time of this story, I was 15, male, and I was also with 3 friends, all 15, also male. Me and my 3 friends, who I will call James, Brad and Ryan for the purpose of this story, were bored with nothing to do. Most of our friends had long gone inside, and the time was probably around 6 or 7 p.m. We were near a small stretch of woods that was near a road that had a nice path to walk through it along with the stream. After walking and conversing for maybe 10 minutes, we stopped at a bench to rest and just play some music and enjoy the last of the heat as the night began to draw in. Not like dark, but just around the time before sunset, when the sky gets a nice orange hue. After sitting and chatting for maybe 15 minutes, with no sign of anyone else on the short trail, an old couple came up walking past us. The woman had a long skirt on, down to her shoes, and one of those old women's hats from like the 40s. I can't remember anything distinctive about her face, except that she seemed maybe 60 or 70 at most, very grey and dull in looks. The man seemed slightly older than the woman, and had a cream shirt on, old jeans, work boots, and a cane in one hand. They had their arms interlocked, and seemed almost ordinary, apart from the clothing and such, which seemed quite dated. We were sat on a small bench that could fit 3 people maximum on it. Therefore me, Ryan, and Brad sat on the bench while James, on the opposite side of the path, sat on the floor facing us. Now just to point out something which becomes somewhat important soon, Brad is of Indian descent while the rest of us were white British. As the couple were to pass through us, James had to bring his legs in to let them pass. However, the man seemed somewhat mad about this and almost scoffed as he walked past James. Understandably, James was a little confused and offended by this, and in a half-assertive, half-joking way said, "Alright mate, no need for that." The couple seemed to ignore it and carried on down the hill. Now this is where things get creepy. We brushed this off as an old man grumpy at the world, trying to seem like a hero to his wife, and expected them to just move along, but this didn't happen. As they reached the bottom of the hill, his head made an almost full 90-degree turn to face us, and with the most menacing look on his face, he charged up the hill. Now the strangest part is a full 60 seconds had at least passed, and now he was pissed? Made no sense. Like, all of a sudden my friend's slight remark had clicked in his brain. He also dropped his cane, much to his wife's despair, and walked almost double his previous speed uphill. We were truly baffled, and maybe expected a stern talking to, and to an extent, that's what we got from him. At least the usual old man stuff, you kids have no respect, and you should watch out, you don't know us, I have grandkids your age, etc. And it was as quickly as he said all of this, he walked back down the hill, retrieved his cane, and began staring at us from the bottom of the hill, alongside his wife. This is where things took a drastic turn. The man then stood there, almost huffing and puffing like an angry toddler. His wife saw this as her turn to make the approach, as he stood, for the whole time after this by the way, staring at us, not blinking, barely moving. His wife made her way back up the hill and began speaking to us. She seemed even more delusional and even incoherent in the way she acted and spoke. Most of the stuff she said was the same as her husband, until she took a huge interest in Brad. Remember how I said he was of Indian descent? She looked him dead in the eyes and said, "You're different to all of these, aren't you?" with an almost half grin on her face. Brad was taken aback and said, "Sorry? Is that a racist?" She shot back instantly with a, "Oh no, I just mean you're different, you're the chosen one." I know, weird, and almost cliche sounding, right? At this we were all shocked, and began shooting each other concerned and confused half glances. Then she began waving into the trees behind the bench where we were sitting, her eyes frantically darting from point to point, and waving almost methodically in motion as she exclaimed loudly and almost proudly, "It's okay, you don't need to watch them anymore. It's fine, you don't need to come out now, you can stay there. At this, we all turned around rapidly to see no one or nothing behind us. And at that, she shot Brad one more deep stare and started her walk again. The old man stared the whole time until they met at the bottom of the hill, interlocked arms, and turned the corner. We were all feeling all types of emotions now, and really didn't know what to do. The woods on either side of our path were thick. So thick, in fact, even teens couldn't enter it, let alone old-age pensioners, so there's only one place they could have gone, which was follow the path on. Ryan had the smart idea to see where they went, so no less than 20 seconds after they rounded the corner, we followed them at an almost running walk speed, and got to the end of the trail, with no sign of them. The end of the trail led to 3 directions: left, into an alley and a shop with a dead end; right, into the start of a busy road with nothing to see; and straight into a cul-de-sac. Brad and I went straight, Ryan went left, James went right, but you guessed it, they were gone. How? We met up in disbelief, shock and confusion, and everything in between. The sun was now pulling in, and we needed to make our way home. Therefore, that's what we did. The way home was at least a 20 to 30 minute walk, half paranoid we would see them again, but not really flustered. It's now been like half a year, and we'd all forgotten about these people and never seen them again. But after reading some stories and hearing them on YouTube, it reminded me of that evening, and I thought you guys would like to hear it.